Have a listen to this. Have a listen to this. Now, that kind of talk this week dragged Australia's share market to a two-year low. There are, of course, complex reasons for that.
He was the big spender. The big spender.
Doing the grocery shopping could take a huge chunk out of the family budget.
And that's finance.
Hello and welcome to Comedian versus Economist. We demystify the world of money and help you get a handle on the bigger picture. My name's Adam and we're joined as always by my little older brother and real-life economist, Thomas. Hi, Thomas.
Yeah, g'day, Adam. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well, thank you. Nothing to plug today? Nothing to plug at all. So let's get straight into it. Massive show coming up. According to the ABS, the size of households is shrinking. We'll ask Thomas what might be causing our houses to shrink. Did we leave them out in the rain too long, perhaps? Fake social media accounts are slinging dirt on Australian miner Linus, and not in a good mining kind of way. For the first time ever, the 60-40 investing rule is failing. We'll take a look at what it is and find out whether my personal investing strategy, the 50-50 guess, is also under threat. Thomas, every week I spend literally minutes and minutes preparing for this show, but you gave me a story today about a government that is making their own beer from poo water, then selling it to its people, and I thought, you beauty, I'll take the day off. These jokes write themselves. That's coming up later, but first, Ashley has sent us an email I wanted to get to just quickly. Ashley sent us an email, cve@equitymates.com, and kind of a long email, but essentially he's asking if we could use the GST as a policy lever to fight inflation. Thomas, is that something we can do?
Yeah, definitely in theory. Anything that sort of increases the tax take and takes money out of households is going to slow the economy. So if your economy is running too hot, upping the GST rate is going to slow things down a bit. So that might take the heat out of inflation. Yeah, we have these sort of like automatic stabilizers built into the tax system. So like when the economy is going badly, there's money coming out of the government going into like dole payments and things like that. So it automatically stabilizes the economy to an extent. So there's sort of that going on. But theoretically it's possible. I think it would be very politically difficult to sell people a hike in the GST as inflation's taking off.
You thought rate increases were fun. Well, get ready for GST increases. Right, so it's not going to happen anytime soon, you don't reckon?
No. It really went out of fashion. And I think as he points out in the email, you'd need an independent board to sort of oversee it and manage it. So it's just you wouldn't have the short-termism of government just messing around with it. But yeah, difficult. There you go, Ashley. I hope that answers your question. He did mention modern monetary theory in the question as well there somewhere, but I think that's unrelated, right? Depends, yeah. Not directly. I mean, they're not, the modern monetary theorists aren't talking about using the GST.
Well, they've all gone very quiet now, haven't they? They're not really talking about much. All right, Thomas, is it true that our houses are getting smaller?
No, not the household size.
Politely now.
No, they're not. The average household size is getting smaller. So this is some data that came out of the Census. So we got the Census results last year from the 2021 Census, and that showed that the average household size is now down from 2.6 people to 2.5 people.
Oh, big news. 2.6 to 2.5.
Yeah. But that's when you're talking about a population of 24 million, that's actually pretty big.
Is it?
Yeah, and what it means is that for the same number of people, you need about an extra 150 to 200,000 homes.
Right, so there's less people living per house, so therefore you need more houses.
Yeah,
right.
For the same population.
Why are they doing it? Why have we got less people per house?
That's a good question. It's a big question. I mean, sort of people talking about, I think there's a couple of things. One is like the need for home offices that came out of COVID.
Oh, yeah.
So that meant people got kicked out of bedrooms and people went and found houses with extra rooms so they could have the home office is one of the theories. I don't know how solid that is.
Well, we did it. We converted one of our rooms, and we didn't get rid of any people from the house. I was tempted to get rid of the youngest the other day, but she stayed on.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. You also get a look at household composition. So you've also got a fall in group households. So group households, I mean, they're pretty small, like 4.3% of the total of households in 2016. That's down to 3.9%. So a bit of a drop in group households. Not as many group households as there used to be.
Group households being what, like share house livers, like uni students
housing
and stuff?
Yeah. Non-family related
Right.
people together, yeah.
I lived in a share house till I was, I think, 33. Someone called me immature. Anyway.
Pretty common. But yeah, but family households is down from 71.3 to 70.5. These don't sound like huge numbers, but they're pretty significant with census and the population data. So like small percentage changes can be quite big. And then a big pickup in single person households, up from 24.4 to 25.6. So it seems at least that some of the story is that there's more people going it alone, and that's why the average size is falling.
I was watching We Crashed the other night, the TV series about WeWork and the collapse of WeWork, and that was all about community. And I thought, as I was watching it, all these people gathering together, it's like, this is not what we want, surely. This is fucked. Maybe I've been tainted by the desire to live alone.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what the whole social media experiments taught us, is that we're very excited to be connected for a while and then realise we didn't really want to be that connected.
As long as we can switch off. Look at memes.
The interesting thing about this is it solves a bit of a puzzle, which we suspected, but which we weren't sure. We talked a little bit about this on the show before, but one of the big puzzles to come out of COVID was that, when it first landed and the borders shut, a lot of the property market analysts are saying, well, this is going to affect rental prices because, we have quite a high immigration intake each year. That's going to go to zero. Therefore, a lot of that's demand for rental housing is going to disappear. There's going to be rental slack and rental prices will fall. That was the kind of consensus view when COVID first hit. But what happened was the exact opposite. And the rental market tightened phenomenally and rents soared. So rents were up 17.5% over the year in Sydney, 18.6% in Brisbane, 15% in Melbourne. So huge jumps in rental prices. And you look at the number of available rental properties, like typically, between 2015 and 2020, there was about 80,000 rental properties on the market at any point in time. That's now down to under 40,000. So the number of available rental properties is halved, and the vacancy rate's gone to 1%, which is the tightest it's ever been. So we ended up with an incredibly tight rental market, even though immigration had gone to zero. And this seems to be the driving factor, that fall in average household size, even though it's not massive, 2.6 to 2.5, that's an extra 200,000 homes. You put that in context, like we build 60,000 new homes in most years. So if it happened all at once, you're talking about over 3 years worth of demand suddenly entering the market at the same time.
Yeah, right.
Which is why it's why I think it's gone as tight as it has.
Is it exacerbated by, supply chain shocks and whatever in terms of building houses and stuff? Does that come into it at all? Or, you talk about 60,000 a year that we'd normally build. Are we slower at building as well? Is that kind of...
I think that's probably hurting at the margin, but it's probably not. It gets swamped by this factor, I reckon.
So what do we do? Do we just start building those pods, sleeping pods that they have in like Japan and stuff? Is that the answer? We're all working from home. Do we just start sleeping at work?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some people were saying that this increase in demand for single person households is a bit at mix in terms of what's being brought to the market. Like mostly we construct new family homes. We're not creating that many single person dwellings, but that's where demand is at the moment.
Because the old 1 bedroom flat was. I always thought they were difficult to sell because when I was first looking at buying a house or buying a unit, I kind of ruled out 1-bedroom ones. I was like, they're kind of unappealing. But you're saying they're the flavour of the month.
Yeah, I think there's definitely demand for it. I mean, it'd be interesting to look at where those single-person households are in. Like if, there might be single people living in 3-bedroom houses, just chilling with
hanging out.
Just hanging out with the big space. Games
Making
room.
some popcorn before they go into the theatre room. All right, Thomas, you told me that Aussie miners might be under threat of cyber attack. What's going on there?
So this is an interesting story we got last week that there's an Aussie miner called Linus that's in the rare earths business.
He invented Linux.
Did it?
Yes, no, he didn't.
No.
It's a different guy altogether.
Oh, okay.
It's one little gag for the computer guys out there. They'll know.
Yeah. All three of them. Thanks for listening. So Linus was the target of a cyber attack, apparently. So this comes from a US cybersecurity firm called Mandiant. Did a report saying that Linus got targeted. So Linus, what they're saying is Linus was pushing for this project. They're getting government support in Texas, and they wanted to build a rare earth processing plant. And they were negotiating a deal with the US government to get $120 million support package to get this project up and running in Texas. And as this is going on, apparently, this is what Mandiant reckons, is that agents acting on behalf of the Chinese government started trying to drum up a protest on social media in Facebook and to sort of to just quash this rare earth push.
So hang on, it was in Texas. It was an Australian company in Texas, but the Chinese government were like, right, we got to do something about this. Yeah. And the best thing they could come up with was, let's make some fake Facebook accounts. Start slinging some mud around. We'll see how they like that. and this massive cyber company called Mandiant are like, whoa, this is big news. Is there more here?
Well, there's a sexy name. They're saying it's the Chinese program called Dragon Bridge.
Oh, yes. Now, okay, I'm back in.
You're back interested in it, yeah.
Yep.
Linus operates the only non-Chinese owned rare earth processing plant in the world.
Right.
So there's only one. So China has an almost total monopoly on rare earth processing.
Do you know what rare earth processing is? I can just sense a few people listening out there going, what is rare earth? I don't know. Is it just minerals and stuff?
Yeah, isn't it? I don't know. There's particular elements that go into the high-tech stuff.
Trace elements like good for the lawn.
Yeah, they got
okay. Rare earth.
Yeah, and they're used in military equipment like drones and electric vehicles and stuff like that.
Got it.
And so so incredibly important to the sort of the future economy, but also to the military industrial complex. And China has a stranglehold on the rare earth market because it owns every processing plant in the world, apart from one which is owned by Linus and operated in Malaysia. And because rare earths generate low-grade radioactivity when they're processed, it seems, this is what they're saying, is the Chinese government has been running a smear campaign against Linus in Malaysia as well, and creating a lot of trouble for them there.
Right.
And that's the playbook that they then brought to Texas to try and make people in Texas angry about it and try to create a protest to try kill this deal. And the thing is that, so on the other side, the American government and the Australian government are trying to break this stranglehold and develop their own rare earth processing. So the Export Finance Australia, as a government agency, has lent $1 billion to Iluka Resources in April, to build a rare earth separation plant in Nebba in Western Australia.
Okay, so if we did it here, we can do what we want because it's Australia.
Yeah. It'd probably be a social media campaign.
Yeah, but it'd be far enough out in the outback maybe that any concerns around radioactivity. Although Texas is a big place too. I'm sensing that might have been the attraction with Texas.
Yeah, possibly.
Can't we just flip it around on these Chinese hackers or whatever and just start like shit posting stuff that they're doing like the radiation producing rare earth, if they're doing like, I feel like there's an opportunity here. If they're doing 99% of the Earth's rare earth processing, generating radioactive output, then I feel like that's something we could call out, and we would have the upper hand over them calling out our 0.08% rare earth processing radiation.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the interesting asymmetry in it, is that you don't have any access to social media in China. Social media in China is very tightly controlled by Beijing.
Yeah, right.
You can't just shitpost against state-owned corporations trying to build critical infrastructure.
Yeah, even ScoMo couldn't get his account back when it got taken off him.
That's right.
It got sold in a cafe. Someone sold Scott Morrison's WeChat account, didn't they? And he's like, "Can I have it back?" And they're like, "No, sorry, there's nothing we can do."
No,
right?
You're not
that's
even
true.
supposed to have one.
Yeah, right. That's a point.
In a free in quotation marks nation like America or Australia, you can launch a social media campaign and.
Which could then again be quite effective because it's a democracy, like, which again is the flip side in China. It's like, what are you gonna lobby? You're gonna try and get the government voted out.
Yeah,
doesn't work.
I mean, you can see it's probably worth a shot. It's like what man, throw $50 of Facebook ads at it and see if you can create a riot in Texas. But I think what is interesting is, like, if they're doing that, right, like that's it, and they talk about the way they did it with like stock images and formulaic usernames with random numbers and letters. So it kind of seemed like it didn't seem pretty thinly veiled as a cyber attack or as a coordinated cyber attack. It just happened around the time they're trying to land this deal. But if that's going on, what else is going on? Like, what else is, what black ops is happening that we're not seeing?
I don't think we can talk about what they're doing here with black ops coming out of Chinese cyber warfare in the same sentence. This is.
Nah, come on. You're being naive. For sure it's going on. It just shows for me, it's like another sign of the times of how far things have turned. Up until 2018, 2019, we were happy for China to have the entire rare earth processing industry. No one thought that was a problem.
It's got all that dirty radiation associated with it.
It's their problem.
Right.
But like no one really thought it was a problem to offshore the entire industrial base. Yeah. Everything that could be offshored got offshored to China, and no one thought it was a problem. And then in 2020, well, 19, before COVID, but 2019, and then particularly with 2020, it's like the Western world woke up and went, whoa, like this is actually a bit of a problem. We can't just we can't rely on China. They can't have complete control of rare earths. Like that's a huge vulnerability. So now they're trying to backpedal and get out of that. And then China's like trying to not let that happen. So that's the tussle that we're in. And, and Anthony Albanese's trying to, repair the relationship with China. But like, there's a strategic rivalry happening here. They're shitposting Aussie miners trying to undermine our rare earth processing capacities. Like, how do you work that into your negotiation?
Yeah. Well, it does explain a few things. I saw someone giving CVE some shade the other day, but that was probably what that was. It was just Chinese hackers just targeting us. We'll probably get more of it now that we've talked about it. We shouldn't even have gone this far. Yeah. But that's what we do here on Comedian versus Economist. We push the envelope. All right, why don't we take a quick break here? We'll go a word from our sponsors. And coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about the end of the 60-40 investing rule, as well as a government that has decided to turn wastewater into beer. All that and more right after this on Comedian versus Economist. Welcome back here on Comedian versus Economist. You can send us an email if you like. We'd love to get them. CVE@equitymates.com or via the website equitymates.com/CVE. And don't forget to check out our Facebook and Instagram pages at CVE Podcast. Thomas, apparently it's been a bad year for the 60-40 rule. Before we find out why, what is the 60-40 rule?
The 60-40 rule is a portfolio strategy which says that you should have 60% of your portfolio in shares and 40% in bonds.
Okay.
And it's called a lazy portfolio strategy. And sort of the basic idea, and there's a number of lazy portfolio strategies, but the basic idea is that people are stupid, that you're stupid. Well, not stupid, but...
This is really speaking to me, this 64-year-old. It's lazy and it's targeted at people who are stupid. Can't believe this is the first time I'm hearing about it. I feel like they're really not targeting the demographic well enough.
Yeah, well, they need lazy, stupid and poorly read.
Now you're talking. They need a better name though. The 60-40 rule. It's like I don't know.
Well, it was the first, so the basic idea is that most people and almost everyone, it's very hard to manage your portfolio on the fly. That most people aren't capable of reading the economic winds and allocate and pivoting into equities and then away from equities into bonds and doing that on the fly. And rather than doing that, you should take a lazy portfolio approach and just go like, okay, I'm just going to lock in 60-40. That's my rule, and I'm going to rebalance every year. And other than that, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to try and actively manage it.
So how does it work? So you split it between 60-40. So you got 60% equities, 40% bonds. What's the attraction with doing it that way? Like, why was that seen as a recipe for success and low sort of risk? Because
I think an academic came up with it and said that this was a good, based on historical data. I think it's saying it's invented in 1981. So,
right. So the idea is that like equities go down, the bonds go up.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So you kind of... But I guess equities go up more than bonds. 60-40.
I mean, the idea, you're diversifying and you're trying to... Yeah, you're trying to create something that weathers all the ups and downs of the market. And so the 60-40 was like the original lazy portfolio. And it's the same idea with ETFs. That's why ETFs became popular. It's like rather than trying to pick stocks, just back the market or back a thematic and just sit back and keep your hands off it. Like you're going to do better. Once you take out fees and cost of trading, you're going to do better just to sit back and not engage. And so the 60-40...
Not financial advice.
Yeah. No, I'm talking to you specifically there. Like, get your hand off it. Don't. Yeah. So that's sort of the idea. And then, so the 60-40 was the original rule, and then a whole bunch of strategies emerged out of that tried to put some more nuance on that. So another famous one, there's dozens of them, but like there's the all-weather portfolio, which was developed by Ray Dalio, who we've talked a bit about. And that's because Tony Robbins asked him to put together a portfolio mix. So, Tony Robbins, the American success guru.
Yeah. They're like a motivational speaking guy.
Yeah. He wrote a money book. So he went to Ray Dalio, the most successful hedge fund manager in the world, one of, and he put together an all-weather portfolio, which was 40% long-term bonds, 30% stocks, 15% intermediate-term bonds, 7.5% gold, and 75% commodities.
Hang on, that makes up more than 100%, doesn't it?
No.
I'm no maths expert.
No.
Add those numbers up. What was it? Say it again.
40% long-term bonds, 30%
40,
stocks, 70, 15% intermediate bonds,
85,
7.5% gold, 7.5% commodities.
15. Okay. All right, good.
Yeah, so that's the all-weather portfolio. The Winklevoss twins came up with the all-crypto portfolio, which was 60% shares, 40% bonds, 90% Bitcoin, and 140% Dogecoin.
So why is the 60-40% 60-40 rule failing now? Why?
This is interesting. Yeah. So it has historically it's done very well. Like saying like Morgan Stanley saying like it delivers 80% of the stock market's return with only 2/3 of the risk. So it gets good returns with low risk because bonds are typically low risk. And then as you're saying, like typically in normal. Like in the stylized economy in the market that we talk about, when growth's going well, equities are going great, but bonds aren't doing so good. When growth's slowing, then equities aren't doing well, but bonds do well. And so you get the sort of the best of both worlds and they balance each other out. But that hasn't happened this year. And they're saying Jonathan Shapiro wrote an article in the AFR saying it's been the worst year on record for the 60-40 rule, saying like 2022 has been the year that's broken the 60-40 rule. Vanguard has a balanced ETF, which is 50-50, so not quite 60-40, but pretty close, and that's down 12% so far this year. So it's getting hammered, and stocks are down obviously, but bonds are down as well, and that's quite unusual historically. You don't normally get that. So
why, to zero in a bit on the bonds thing, why are bonds down? Because that's the problem, right? Like equities go down, we go fine. The equities are down, the share market's dropped, companies are overvalued, or cheap money's ending, blah, blah, blah. And interest rates are going up. And my understanding is that bonds should start to then go up as interest rates go up. So why are bonds down? Like, shouldn't bonds be on the way up to balance it out? What's causing bonds to stay low?
This is where the gap in my understanding.
Good. That I asked. Do you want to hear my theory?
Yeah, sure.
Well, my theory is that nobody knows what the hell's going on, yourself included.
Yeah, that's right.
And that bonds rely on some level of predictability about interest rates. And so, because you have, your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, whatever, and they're not moving in the way that they would normally move because no one knows what's going to happen ultimately with interest rates. So you can't offer a 10-year bond at 5% interest if you don't know that the interest rate might fall off a cliff in like 1 year's time. Like if the heads of the central banks, like Phil Lowe, has a pretty ordinary track record of predicting what's going to happen, in 2 months, let alone in 2 years. I don't know. That's my read.
That would be my expectation too. Like no one predicted this kind of market kind of reality. And I think my guess is that it does come down to the way that central banks have messed with money markets. So it's not, they stopped with money printing, and they're no longer just controlling the interest rate. They're controlling money across the spectrum. And so the RBA had their yield curve control policy, which was like suppressing the yields over the sort of 5-10 year sort of horizon. So you're no longer in a free market where it's determined by demand and supply. There's this gorilla in the room, and what the gorilla does with its money determines what's happening with bonds, I think. And because it's all new, like we haven't had this reality before where all the central banks of the world at the same time are in their markets messing with yields and actively messing with yields, saying like, we're here to do this, we're here to keep control yields. So it's kind of a new reality, and as that unwinds, it's unpredictable, and it's unwinding at the same time as the share market is coming off. So you've got that sort of that influence of the central banks being unwound at the same time as share markets globally are tanking. So I think that's why it's sort of been a bad year for bonds as well. So I think like the basic theory of the 60-40 rule is sound. We just haven't tested it in an economic environment where central banks are playing such a dominant role.
I mean, I think it would be fascinating if like it turned out that 80% of the problems with the 60-40 rule were caused by 20% of the monetary policy that we've put in place. Because if the 80-20 rule broke the 60-40 rule, that's when you know it's time to just stop, get out. The world's done. Right, Thomas, hardly news these days, but there's a new craft beer hitting the market, but this one's a bit different. What's going on?
Yeah, this one's being made by recycled sewage water. So, yeah.
For a hard-earned thirst. Drink your own wee. Right. Where do we start? What's
well, it's happening in Singapore. So Singapore is leading the way here. So it's a collaboration between the country's water agency, the National Water Agency, and a local craft brewery, Brewworks. The beer is called New Brew. The Brewworks describes the beer as highly quaffable, suitable to Singapore's tropical climate with a smooth, toasted honey-like aftertaste.
Toasted honey?
Yeah.
The National Water Agency, which is part of PUB, which is the Public Utilities Board. But so once you had that acronym, it's almost like they're obliged to start making beer. Like we can't... we can't call ourselves pub and not make beer. They looked around and they're like, what are we going to, what do we make it out of? Well, we own the waterworks. Righto.
Do you reckon some consultants come back with a logo and go like, no, you've totally misread what pub's about? Like, oh, what do we do now?
I think it helps though. It helps if your water agency is controlled by pub. Like, makes buying the beer more palatable. Like, if that was in South Australia, we just got like SA Water. I'm not drinking a beer made by SA Water. Instead of Coopers, we could have Poopers. So why are they doing it is the obvious question. Why did they release a beer?
Well, apparently they're big on water recycling, so they do quite a lot of it. They call it new water, and it's recycled sewerage water. And mostly it's been used for cooling and industrial purposes, but they're saying
What? Stop there. Cooling and industrial, the natural segue to beer production.
They're aiming to meet 55% of their water needs by 2060 through new water. So that's pretty substantial. And you got to remember, Singapore is a small urban island with very few sort of natural resources, and I think water is always going to be a story for them. And I think it's one of the things, as we've seen, like we're talking about Singapore with chicken recently, with Malaysia banning chicken exports. Like I think it's one of the things with supply chains breaking down. I think nations everywhere are a bit like, whoa, we're a bit vulnerable here to things going skew if. And Singapore in particular, like it's food and water. It's not sort of missing out on luxury items. It's like your basics.
Well, remember, because when we talked about that, they were pretty insistent on fresh chicken. And like maybe this is the reason. They're like, look, we can't muck around with like salmonella or any kind of gastro situation here with like frozen chickens, because if that hits the waterways, then people are going to be drinking it in their beer, and it's too great a risk.
I mean, there's a treatment process, obviously. There's microfiltration, reverse osmosis, as well as ultraviolet light to heat it with. So. But I think it's also pretty, you think about all of that, like it's got to be fairly energy intensive, which is, we talk about there's the Sun Cable project in WA. It's going to like massive solar farm with a cable direct to Singapore. Right. Pumping energy to Singapore. So maybe that's something that's going to go into beer.
I don't know if, I think this might fit into the just because you can doesn't mean you should category though. Because I remember watching TV a few years ago, and I think maybe one of the guys from The Chaser was on there, and he was like walking around a Sydney mall somewhere, like handing out drinking water that was made from wastewater. So we've had the technology for some time, but people were just like tasting it, and some people said, yeah, it tastes fine, but ultimately, would you drink it? Probably not, because you've got the choice. You go, well, I've got tap water, so as long as that's still running. So I think it's smart, because like you go, well, I'm not going to drink water, but if you give it to me in beer form, my standards significantly drop once it gets to beer. Like, you've only got to look at Forex. People drink anything.
I mean, there's a big bridge to cross in terms of public acceptability with it, even though it's probably perfectly fine. Yeah, like Toowoomba was talking about doing this a decade or so ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had a water shortage, but then someone started calling it Poowoomba. That kind of was the end of it. I don't think it went anywhere after that.
Yeah, it's not. It's one meme away from the end of production. You know what would be amazing though is like they could set it up. If they could set it up in such a way, how pubs nowadays have like a visible like keg room where they store all the kegs and there's pipes and it's all industrial, and then you get those other kind of upmarket pubs where you go to the trough in the men's and there's like one-way glass that looks out over the restaurant or over the over the brew room. Like imagine if you could just see your wee going down the trough straight into a pipe, circling around a few, passing through some little
Microfiltration.
osmosis devices, and then straight into the taps. You'd really feel connected to your local pub. Talk about a sense of community. On that note, I think we might leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning into Comedian versus Economist once again. We do really appreciate you joining us every week for this silliness at times, but hopefully it's interesting and informative as well. Thomas, that's all from us. Thank you for your company once again. Thank you for your company out there. We look forward to talking to you again next time on Comedian versus Economist.
Comedian vs. Economist is a product of Equity Mates Media. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional finance, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of Comedian vs. Economist are not financial professionals and are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. Do not take financial advice from a podcast. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the Equity Mates website, where you can find ASIC resources and find a registered financial professional near you. In the spirit of reconciliation, Equity Mates Media and the hosts of Comedian vs. Economist acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today.